Alice in Borderland Season 3 was recently released, and in the final episode, during the climax of the show, we were introduced to arguably the most important character that we've ever seen in it, the Watchman. With limited screen time, there wasn't much time to be able to delve into his history, how he ended up there, his powers, and who he truly was. So with that, I wanted to delve into the character, dig just a little bit deeper, and share everything that there is to know about the apparent ruler of the Borderlands. So let's get into it. Here is Alice in Borderland, the Watchman explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. How did he end up there? The origin of how the Watchman ended up inside of the Borderlands and essentially operating and running the games is something that's truly unknown. I would say that the Watchman is on a completely different level of authority to the characters that were seen throughout Season 1 and Season 2 that were perceived to be the leaders of the cards in the games, such as the Queen of Hearts and characters like that. This is because the Watchman was somebody that held a wider and deeper purpose in the Borderlands, as he not only held multiple games due to it being a tournament and it restricting the players from having a sense of freedom between games, but also because of what his sole purpose was. I believe he was the ruler of the Borderlands as well as the Watchman. His games were there for those that ended up there a second time and were truly playing with death. There was a sense of authority there like no other, and with him also tricking people. Something that wasn't as present in the standard cards, it showed a sense of power that he had as well. To me, it felt like the Watchman was somebody that almost made a deal with the devil. He spoke of the appeal of death and the fact that, unlike life, when you step off into the vortex, which is death, it's a place with no pain, no suffering, no struggle or upset. Everything just became over in the click of a finger. Life, however, was a place that contained all of those struggles. The Watchman ended up as this middleman, and within the manga he was referred to as the Joker, but also the Ferryman. When Arisu and the Watchman were in conversation with one another, he mentioned to Arisu that death was something that passes him by, and he'll never get to experience it. He's essentially immortal. I do wonder if the form that he took on as this man was because he was in control of humans and it was a way of mirroring those that were in front of him, or if it was like this because he was once a human who essentially took on the role of the Watchman. Maybe he was like Arisu, somebody who the previous ruler of the Borderlands was interested in, and that's how he got the position. Or one could also say, there's a god in heaven and a devil in hell, so purgatory, the land between life and death, the Borderlands, could have just naturally had him from the very beginning. The Watchman's powers. In terms of the Watchman's powers, he has many that sit within his arsenal. First off, he's the ruler of the Borderlands, so one would imagine that he's able to dictate the games and the types of games that get played within it, meaning that he comes up with them. As well as that, he can control the elimination tool that often gets used, as we saw him use it on Banda when he planned on killing Arisu, so he clearly has the freedom to eliminate as he pleases with no consequence. Another power that we saw him exhibiting was the fact that he could freeze the entirety of the environment that he was in, warp the reality that players were in, and allow whomever it was that he wanted to be able to roam freely within it to be able to. For the players that were frozen, it was as if they were frozen in time and they weren't aware of anything that had happened to them, so time was moving at a completely different pace for them rather than for what it was for the Watchman. Another really important ability that he has is the fact that he's immortal and he doesn't have the ability to die in any way whatsoever. Being the Watchman and the ruler of the Borderlands, he's unable to die of natural causes, but one would also imagine that nobody is able to kill him in the Borderlands because it's essentially his to rule. So he's unbeatable when it comes to life and death. That did make me question the appearance that he had, as he was considered to be an elderly gentleman, which is a name that he does also go by in the manga. But I'm imagining that he goes by that appearance in order to seem wise and trustworthy, rather than age being something that would eventually get him. Another important power that we don't get to see but is extremely valuable is that he's all-present and all-knowing when it comes to everything that occurs in the Borderlands, and he's able to read the intentions of what people want and what they've been through. This allows him to fully understand an individual and what it is that they're hoping to get. Alongside that, he's also able to transfer people into the land of the dead or back to the land of the living, essentially dictating whether people die or not. This is arguably the thing that's the most powerful and the most important, dictating life and death. The final ability that he has, and this was one which was a lot more bleak when compared to the others, was that he had the ability to see into the future and see when the Borderlands would essentially be filled with souls that would be stuck in purgatory. This is due to him mentioning to Arisu about the tsunami that looked set to hit Los Angeles and it being something that would cause more people than before to end up there. So within his mind, he must either be able to sense when death and devastation is on the way, or he has a calendar of when these catastrophic global events are going to occur. The Watchman is a man and an entity that can't be defeated in any way whatsoever if it comes to killing him, especially in his own realm, and the powers that he holds allow him to constantly have the upper hand. The Watchman's games. When it comes to the games that have to be played with the Joker, there are obviously the 9 tournament games that we saw taking place throughout the entirety of Season 3, but this section is more about the specific one-on-one game that gets played with him before a player can leave. When meeting the Watchman, players have a whole deck of cards in front of them in which 2 cards are selected and then given to them. If a player finds a card that isn't a Joker, then they're in control of their destiny and they're able to go back to the land of the living. However, if they pick up a Joker card, then it means that their destiny is in the hands of the Watchman, which essentially means that he can decide whether they go back to the land of the living, whether they stay as a resident in the Borderlands, or whether they go to the land after, the land of the dead. We saw that the Watchman rigged the game and made it so that Arisu pulled 2 Joker cards, and that's something that I think he probably does to all of the players. This is because he's the ferryman, the man that transports the souls, so if people had their own choice every time if they could enter the afterlife or not, he wouldn't be doing his job properly. So I think it's actually a rigged game, but because Arisu was an interesting person, as he said himself, he allowed him to take control of his own destiny. The appearance in the show versus the manga. When it comes to the appearance of the Watchman, there are 2 different depictions of him. However, there is one blistering similarity between the both of them. The first is that they both carry and hold the Joker card, and that's the very thing that makes it known that it's them. Within the Netflix show, the Watchman had piercing eyes that felt like they were looking directly into the character's soul, and he wore an all-black suit with a black hat, pretty much showing that he was on the side of darkness and embodying a shadow. He was an elderly gentleman, which in my eyes showed that he was wise and came with life experience, wanting to be seen as somebody that could be trusted. This is actually very different to how the Watchman appears in the manga. Within the manga, he pretty much does appear as a silhouette, looking like a shadow that does blend into the darkness. There's force that feels like it's pushing off of him, and he feels like a supernatural spirit, rather than a man. Whilst the silhouette is of a man, there are no features that show that he is in fact human. This is an appearance that I quite like because in this instance, the Watchman is essentially death, and he leads people towards it. So it being represented by a dark shadow that feels authoritative, it's quite haunting. However, I would say the Netflix show got the image locked in well for a completely different reason. This seems to be all that's known about the man that's known as the Watchman. At face value, he's the Joker and he's the person that rules over the Borderlands, deciding who lives and dies. He's a powerful entity, and as I said at the start of the video, the most important character that we've ever been introduced to. It's just a shame that we didn't get to see him a little bit more. So, there you have it, Alice in Borderland, The Watchman Explained. If you want to see Alice in Borderland Season 3 being broken down, then check the playlist below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. What did you think of Season 3? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.